Willkommen in Amsterdam. Or, as we would say in our native language, Malaysian, Selamat datang ke Amsterdam, which is clearly a party city because everybody was clearly partying last night. And we have very few people here, but I would really like to thank the ones who are here to support us. Thank you very much for being here this morning so early. Thank you. Thank you. So the video that you just saw really captured 12 years of web and travel. It's a full cycle for us of watching Asia grow and change as the online travel part of it grew and grew faster than we all imagined. It's a full cycle of seeing a chunk of the 4.4 billion people living in Asia embrace travel, not just as aspiration, but a way of life. It's a full cycle of watching the fellow dreams of my fellow Asians take flight as low-cost airlines open up the skies for us, first in Southeast Asia and then in Northeast Asia. And it's a full cycle of watching my fellow Asians change in their behavior, influenced by technology, and this one device to rule them all, and thereby changing the face of travel in Europe. And this image was snapped last week when I was at the Powers Court Gardens in Ireland. So welcome to the second edition of WIT Europe. In the next 2 hours, our speakers will share their knowledge and insights about our region, and hopefully they will inspire you to reimagine our region. Because I believe that we are at the cusp of a new cycle of travel in Asia, because this time is going to be different from anything in the West, and it's not going to follow patterns that are set in the West. Because in this next story, Asia is setting its own pace and telling its own story. And here are 5 reasons why. Number 1, growth. Growth propels its own story. The next story will not be told in the major cities in Asia, but in the secondary cities. Because if you look at the top 10 outbound markets in China, the fastest growth are coming from cities that most of us have never heard of. In ASEAN, which is a grouping of 10 countries in Southeast Asia, is a similar story. Being relatively late to urbanization, only 30% of people live in urban areas in ASEAN. So in the next story, it's the secondary cities with populations ranging from 500,000 to 5 million that will provide the next tailwind of growth. And they will bring with it very different consumer behavior. The second factor, the intra-Asia effect. Just as much of Europe's travel is really powered by our neighbors, by your neighbors, in Asia is powered by our neighbors. And if you take the whole of Asia, intra-Asia makes up more than 70% of travel within the region. So if you want to succeed in Asia, you've got to be able to plug into this intra-Asia effect. And one company that you can watch and learn from and how they've done it is AirAsia, with its grouping of 7 airlines and feeding into a network intra-Asia effect. So number 3, a trilogy of power rising for the first time. So in the past, it was always the US and the UK, which were the powers in online travel. So if you look at Priceline numbers for 2016, we heard yesterday that Booking.com does 1.4 million room nights a day. In Asia, they are powering on, and Japan is their fastest growing market. Expedia, now at 72 billion gross bookings, wants to become the first 100 billion travel company in the world. And you can bet that Asia is going to play a big part of that growth. But now, we have a new power rising, China. Ctrip, a Chinese dragon buying a Scottish unicorn and growing and expanding their footprint outside China. The other power that's rising, HNA Group, which is making acquisitions, 7 airlines and counting, and expanding their travel and tourism empire. And I would say watch these 2 companies as they expand the next 2 years. The fourth trend is happening in Asia that's not happening anywhere else, and it's the rise of the marketplaces. When we were in Seoul, having our event on April 27th, we heard new names like Tmon, Coupang, and Gmarket, names that we hadn't heard of 2-3 years ago, and they're all coming into travel powered by mobile. In Japan, Rakuten remains one of the top online travel giants in that country, and Fliggy in China, once known as AliTrip, has declared its intention to become the world's largest travel company in 5 years. So fake news or alternative facts, we don't know, but the fact is, the next cycle will bring forth names that we've not heard of before. Because if you heard of Paytm, anyone? That's an Indian mobile wallet that set up a travel vertical. 5, lastly, the new wave of innovation that's coming out of Asia. In Korea, we heard a speaker said, mobile is not the future. It is the only future. And it's around mobile that a lot of the innovation is happening in Asia. For example, Handy, which is a handheld device that goes into hotel rooms, started by a Hong Kong startup, Think Labs, raising $125 million for a global rollout. 2, WeChat. Everybody knows about WeChat and how it's really created an ecosystem from which you can never leave, like Hotel California. 3rd point, live streaming. It is huge in China, a $4 billion market in China alone, bigger than the special effects industry or the film industry. And I was speaking to an executive from a Hollywood film studio in Asia last week. They have a huge franchise that sells everywhere else, but it doesn't sell in China. And he said, now they are looking at models in China and seeing how they can transplant these models in the West. And this is why Expedia has opened its innovation lab in Singapore after London and Seattle. And here's what CEO Dara had to say about it. I think as an American company, if we are thinking of these factors on a part-time basis, we are not going to be part of the innovation.